It's UFC 257. The combat sports leader returns to Fight Island with an epic headline. The biggest star in the sport, the notorious Conor McGregor, will rematch Dustin The Diamond Poirier. Since his move to 155 pounds, Dustin Poirier has built an enviable resume.
Dustin Poirier with the finish!
And after emerging victorious in a 2020 candidate for Fight of the Year against fellow contender Dan Hooker, he'll be looking to solidify his position at the top of the division as the #1 contender. Standing in his way, however, is the returning former lightweight world champion Conor McGregor. The biggest star in the sport is back and better than ever. And after making short work of veteran Donald Cowboy Cerrone at UFC 246, he once again has his sights set on the UFC lightweight title.
It's my name in history one more time.
Will the Diamond shine on Fight Island, or will the Notorious One reign supreme once more? Hello and welcome along to the very first edition of UFC Inside the Octagon for the year 2021. John Gooden alongside Dan Hardy. And Dan, this is a big one. The combat sports leader has launched into the year 2021 and they've gone big style. Back to Fight Island. It's the return of the biggest star in mixed martial arts, Conor McGregor. He's facing off with one of the most popular fighters on the planet in Dustin Poirier. And of course, it's a rematch, Poirier versus McGregor 2. What say you, Dan Hardy?
I'm very excited, John Gooden. The Fight Island 3 2021's here. We're kicking off with McGregor. And it's the fight that I wanted to see at 155. You know, the fact that this is 6 years since the last time they faced one another. Poirier has developed into a very formidable 155er. McGregor's still the biggest star in the sport, coming back down into a rematch to try and put himself into this division in a relevant position now that belt's floating around. I mean, it's the fight everybody wants to see in this division. And the fact that we're kicking off 2021, the first pay-per-view with this, these ripples are going to continue on through the rest of the year, no doubt.
And I love the fact that this was sort of born out of a charity challenge between the two fighters as well. They both do great work in their respective communities. So that adds something very nice and very special as well. All right, Dan, let's go over to the facts and the stats as we always do then. And we have the former champ against the former interim champ who has challenged for that undisputed title as well. And starting at the very top there, we have two fighters in their prime. McGregor is 32, Poirier is 31. But I wanted you to give us some analysis on the size here, because they're the same height. The reach is an inch in favour of McGregor. But the way he fights, is that significant at all?
Well, I mean, I think, you know, obviously it is only an inch on a tape measure, but in a fighting style, it makes a huge difference, because you've got to think how McGregor utilises that reach. You know, he stands long, he stands side on, and when he's throwing that left hand, as we've got into in the past and we'll get into again in this show, he fully extends that left hand as far as he can. So he makes a lot of range up with the length of his arms just by purely utilising his reach to the best of his ability. Whereas on the flip side, you've got Poirier, who his punches tend to be short. He tends to stand much closer, much squarer, throwing power punches. But, you know, I mean, if we look at this, that's why he's got the third highest striking rate in UFC history, because his punches come in flurries. He's not that one-punch knockout finisher like McGregor is. He wears people down. It's a barrage of punches. And, you know, as you can see, it's effective. You know, 10th most wins in UFC history. His style works over the distance, especially into the championship rounds. So, like, if I'm Poirier, I'm taking confidence in him and his fighting style, as long as he can keep his mentality together facing McGregor.
Let's take a walk down memory lane, shall we? September 2014 seems like a very different time, particularly when we consider 2020, of course. 178, UFC 178, featherweight division. Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, what went down?
Okay, well, I mean, to be honest, the fight kind of started at the face-offs at the press conference, and every opportunity that McGregor had to interact with Poirier before the actual fight started. And you know, and that's very typical of McGregor. You know, even Nate Diaz hinted at it in that famous post-fight speech. It's like, we don't want to see you fight these guys that you've already beaten at the press conference. I kind of felt like that from Poirier going in. And even at the face-off, you saw him reactive to McGregor. But straight away, McGregor comes out, he commands the space as he does with a big wide frame, big long guard, spinning kicks to kind of corral his opponent up against the fence. There was a bit of a feeling out process. But immediately you could tell that McGregor was the one that was winning the psychological battle here. He was trading shots, he was picking shots, but if you watch Poirier in this circumstance here, he's moving away, he's backing up, he's allowing McGregor to push him around the octagon a little bit. And every time Poirier does step in and he maybe throws a low kick, he's not engaging, he's not throwing like he's trying to damage. He's throwing like he's trying to figure out what's going to come at him. And it's much less about an aggressive approach from Poirier and much more about dealing with what he's up against. And right at this point where McGregor lands the finishing shot, I'm just going to pull that back a second. The most important thing, aside from all the technical stuff, is the posture, the look on Poirier's face. Because he, to me, looks uncomfortable here. And as that shot comes over the top, it just clips him across the side of the head. It's a very unusual punch. McGregor prefers his opponents skirting along the octagon so he can punch them into it, across their face, across their chin. Poirier was doing the right things. He was circling in the direction that makes McGregor slightly more uncomfortable, but McGregor was still able to land that left hand, but it just clipped him across the top of the head. It was a really odd punch. It was almost like it took his equilibrium away, and as Poirier landed, the hammer fist that followed it was the thing that really finished it off. You can definitely see his legs go, but as he's landing, he's putting his hands down, so he wasn't completely unconscious. So the follow-up shots were the ones that did it. Now, one thing I will say about Poirier is that in that first sort of 60 to 90 seconds, you see in his posture, he's quite tense. And it seems to me a little bit like when he steps in there, he needs about 90 seconds to kind of warm up and get used to the fact that he's back in the octagon and someone's throwing real life punches at him. Once he's past that point, he starts to warm up and get into the fight a bit, and he quite enjoys himself, and that's when he gets very dangerous, like stepping into range with confidence. But those first 90 seconds when he's quite tense, I feel like it takes much less power on a punch to hurt him because he's so tense. And it just seemed like that punch stung him and took his legs away. That's what he's got to get over this time around, is that 90 seconds is crucial for him.
Well, from 90 seconds to a career built at 155, Dustin Poirier went immediately after that fight with McGregor, upper weight division to lightweight. And he's really established himself, Dan, as one of the greats at 155. He's been involved in some of the most epic fights the division's ever seen, some of the best rounds I've ever seen as a fan of mixed martial arts. And even some of those wins, they've aged so well, like Diego Ferreira and Eddie Alvarez, and the win against Justin Gaethje that you were just talking about there. He has turned into a very accomplished force at the lightweight division.
He has. If we draw a line under his career as a featherweight and we look at what he's done since he's moved up, what I would say is he takes a punch better, he's more durable, his conditioning's better, and he's not lost that aggression that some people lose when they go up and they're fighting bigger guys. Like, he's still getting in the pocket with guys like Justin Gaethje and taking their best shots. He's not trying to style it and be the quicker fighter coming up from featherweight. He's still brawling like he's a big 155er. So I honestly feel like this expression of Dustin Poirier is the better version that we're going to get, because 155 is the right weight class for him at this moment, which is also coupling him with the experience of his career so far. I think that's what makes him such a formidable force. But it all comes down to intelligence. The decision making has to be on point in this fight, because that's the point of difference between the two. Like, McGregor's very clear what he's trying to do, and Poirier is very clear that he's going to try and beat you to the punch every time and wear you down before the final bell.
So, Dan, on the other side, it's a slightly different story, because McGregor did stick with 145 pounds, of course, and he went on to capture that belt emphatically. Then after that, much like he did with the Cage Warriors promotion, he wanted to go and become a double champion. Again, he did that. But I guess the theme is he's always remained a developing mixed martial artist.
He has, absolutely. And I think, what we saw after the Poirier fight, we saw the stoppage from the left hand. Then he went on to face Siva and then Mendes and then Aldo. And all three of those fights, he just further re-established how dangerous his left hand is. Obviously, he had a couple of fights at 170, but then returning to 155, did the same thing against Alvarez. What's nice about all those fights is that the delivery of the left hand there's similarities, but there are slight differences as well. So it's not like there's only one way you can land this punch. There are several different ways that he applies it. But then, as we're moving forward, we're seeing people expecting it now, so trying to work around it, which is forced him to add different facets to his game. As we saw in that last fight with Cowboy, the left hand missed straight into shoulder strikes, which was the end of the fight. Now, I'm going to show you this Cowboy fight. First of all, I've got my favorite camera angle, which is camera 7. This is the top camera angle from above the octagon. So you get to really see not only the layout of the fight and how it plays out, but also how whoever is controlling the octagon is doing it. Right. McGregor comes out, and the first thing he's going to do, as soon as he walks across, he prepares himself, and then he lunges into a real powerful left hand. Now, he's got excellent takedown defense, as we've seen. And this was a real quick reaction because obviously Cowboy was level changed and underneath before McGregor's left hand had been fully released. But watch the way he steps into this. Look how deep that right foot steps. Now, what I'm saying here is that this back foot's off the floor and all of his weight is on this lead leg. And now you can see, obviously, Cowboy's level changed underneath, but the punch is going all the way over. So not only is his weight off his back leg, but all of his weight is now over his lead leg. John, I'm going to ask you to remind me of that in a moment when we come onto the Poirier playlist, because that's key.
Noted.
We know this is a really dangerous weapon of his. There are certain things that he has to do every time in order to land it with power. And there are certain things that Poirier can do to kind of deconstruct that. That's what I want you to remind me on, John. Okay, so as this plays through, he's thrown the punch over Cowboy's head. Cowboy's level change, and you're going to see him swing his left hand back to go for a crossface. And then he's going to start moving himself away. The reason he's moving back is because he's trying to create space to get his head in position so he can have real estate to throw his shoulder through. So there's the first shoulder strike there. He's got his head position in. He's got the overhook on Cowboy's arm, and then he's throwing that shoulder strike in there. Now, what we're going to see as he backs up a little bit further, we can see Cowboy's elbow is extended out the back here. It's sticking out behind him. As McGregor goes to throw this next shoulder, you're going to see Cowboy's elbow shoot through because McGregor's pulled it to hit him with the shoulder. It's like pulling somebody onto a knee with a tie clinch. Very, very similar kind of situation. So watch this. We've got that pry right in between to keep a bit of space between the two. Same reason that the head position's there, but then there's the shoulder strike. Bang. And then he puts his head back in position to go for a second one. And that's the one that does the damage because you see Cowboy's posture breaks. And now Cowboy's starting to try and turn his head away, in which case Conor uses this opportunity to break, and now he's back to controlling. Look at this, big stance like he always does, like he does against everybody, make himself look as big as possible. Then he throws that nice lead uppercut that he did against Holloway, just to keep Cowboy moving back, force him against the fence. Now Cowboy does something that McGregor is prompted by here. Cowboy throws a kick, and McGregor responds. So the kick from Cowboy, response from McGregor, but then McGregor circles him down. And he, again, as we spoke about in the Poirier fight, and as we've seen in the Brandao fight, the Siva fight, the Mendes fight, he circles around to the side of the fence so he can punch across them. It's a very clear pattern that McGregor's got to the delivery of his left hand. But watch this. He's going to jump in with a knee, but he's going to land his back foot placed. Now, that knee is literally just a segue to put him in a position where that left hand is now coming right across Cowboy's head. That's the whole point of that footwork. It's beautiful. But at this point, the truth is the fight was already done. It was a consummate performance from McGregor. It was a very powerful showing, a very dominant showing. Can he do the same thing at 155? Will he look the same going back down to 155? Because I'll tell you, John, we stood next to him during that fight week and he was heavily muscled. He's got thick legs, thick back. That's a big question for me going down to 155 for this next one. But, if anyone's going to push him at 155, it's Poirier.
Okay, Dan, we're going to pause you for just a moment there because it is time to take a break. On the other side, we're going to be talking much more about this incredible fight, UFC 257. And I haven't forgotten, Dan, you mentioned a couple of things that you want me to remind you for. All of that when we come back. Welcome back to part 2 of UFC Inside the Octagon, where we're talking about the big main event at UFC 257, Poirier versus McGregor 2. Now, Dan, we've covered the careers up to today now for both of these fighters and how they've gone from having that match at 145 pounds all the way through to this rematch at 155. And you've been telling me to note a couple of things about McGregor I'm now reminding you, but I'm going to lean on the first 90 seconds, couple of minutes of a Poirier fight. It's something he's identified himself in interviews that he's perhaps a little bit of a slow starter. So going over to Dustin Poirier, how does he mitigate that? And also, why did you want me to remind you about this thing of McGregor?
Well, I think those first 90 seconds is kind of the time where Poirier kind of finds his feet in the octagon. He just looks a little bit tense to me. And you know, and I know we've discussed this, John, the interview where he talks about being a slow starter, like he's acknowledged it himself. If anyone's going to make you freeze up and a bit tense in the first couple of minutes, it's going to be McGregor, especially if he's already got a win over you. So this is where Poirier's really got to control his psychology when he gets in there. He's really got to be clear on what he's trying to achieve in those first 2 rounds. If I'm Dustin Poirier, I'm thinking to myself, okay, McGregor's whole game is built around his left hand, and I'm not discounting any element of his left hand of his game, but the left hand is clearly the tip of the spearhead of everything that he does. So my first point of call is to be wary of that, and B, to try and dismantle that in some way. Now, the reason I was talking about how heavy he's planting on his lead leg is because Dustin Poirier, when he's not trying to get into a scrap, he's got quite good footwork and low kicks. We don't see it very often because it only lasts sort of 10 seconds in a fight. But what would be valuable in this fight, especially given the fact that you've got 2 southpaws facing each other, so that lead calf kick is going to be very, very valuable for Poirier. He needs to set it up with his hands, and he needs to be very intelligent about it, but also not to be too concerned about engaging McGregor. Like, this was what Nate Diaz did so well against McGregor, is he allowed McGregor to work. Like, he allowed him to work as he defended. If he chops a low kick and moves away, uses a bit of footwork, covers what McGregor's throwing at him, and keeps that pace going, slowly dismantling that lead leg is going to affect everything in McGregor's game. And any time he can slow McGregor down, it will also take some of that octagon control away from McGregor, which will take some of the pressure off Poirier. You know, it's like a 10-point game plan, and he needs to make sure he goes through 1, 2, and 3 before he even starts thinking about 4. But game plan number 4 is stepping into the breach with power punches, which he just doesn't want to be doing in the first round or 2. Like, dismantle that lead leg, slow the left hand down, and take some of the mobility away. Then he might even be able to railroad McGregor into doing something he doesn't necessarily want to do, which is clinch. I think that would be the smart thing for Dustin Poirier. And I think that is one way that he can keep control of himself, just focus on low kicks and footwork, and also he's putting water in the basement, as Teddy Atlas would say, which will pay off later in the rounds when he decides to start putting his foot on the gas. This,
I mean, obviously begs the question, Dan, like you're talking about the 10-point plan, what is like 4 to 10? And my thoughts that are coming to me are how he approached his last fight with Dan Hooker, actually, where he did have a slightly slow start against someone who has a reach, albeit not a southpaw, and maybe not as concussive power, but he's having his most fun when he's a pressure fighter. But remind us of how he applies the pressure, Dan, and how he builds on that pressure and ultimately comes away with brilliant victories.
Okay, well, he's had that same characteristic all the way through his career. It's become slightly more refined in the recent years, and one thing that I will say is he's added a little bit more variety to the angles of his punches. Like those old WEC days, it was bang, 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 and he's going uppercuts, and then he's coming hooks and uppercuts. Now, obviously, you know, with the Justin Gaethje fight, we saw that knee come up the center line. You know, there's some more variety to it, but the intention's still the same. It's still overwhelmed with volume. Like, he's not a one-punch knockout fighter like McGregor. He does put people down, but oftentimes it's because there's been a process of wearing down before. What I like about what Poirier does with his striking skills, especially once he's got over that 90-second hump, which seems to slow him down a little bit and make him tense. Once he gets into his rhythm and he's stepping forward to, you know, into the pocket to land, his defense gets better as well. He squares up, he stands square to them, his feet are square. I mean, you know, you'll see clips where he's standing like on that little panel between the 2 black lines in the octagon. Looks like he's snowboarding. Like, he's standing right on that spot, he's standing in front of his opponent, he's leaning into them, and he's throwing power punches one after the next. Those moments are going to be really valuable. He just can't be doing that from the first round, and he can't be doing that like recklessly. Like, he needs to apply that. He needs to use that like a blowtorch. Like, you don't want to keep that on all the time and burn the fuel out. You need to Put it on when it needs a bit of heat and then take it away, and then put it on when it needs a bit of heat and take it away, and apply it and build that up. That's the 10-point plan. I mean, basically from 4 to 10 is doing the same thing, but with a little bit more intensity. But a little bit more intensity, but a lot more consciousness, so he's not running onto that left hand. Like, there are a lot of facets in Poirier's game where he can cause McGregor problems, striking and grappling. The psychology is the undoing of his game, because he gets too excited or too nervous, and then he starts doing things that aren't characteristic of him. And that's when McGregor looks like such a professor, because he knows with clear sight what exactly he's trying to achieve in there. But that may be because his game is focused entirely on that spear point, which is the left hand.
I can't get UFC snowboard out of my head, Dan. I thought that was a very nice analogy, but he's going to have to swap that for a sandboard, because of course he will be fighting in the desert and it will be a little bit warmer over there in Abu Dhabi. Moving along, Dan, and I was considering the grappling elements, and you spoke about the clinch there for a second and how this might play out. And then I sort of slapped myself, get a grip of yourself, John. Don't even be thinking about how this one might get into those sorts of ranges. But actually, when you go back through the catalogue of fights for both of these fighters and their opponents and what's happened, Hooker, someone who's a notable striker in the division, he decided to try and grapple with Dustin Poirier due to the pressure that he put on him. And of course, we've got to go back to that first Diaz fight for McGregor, where he forced a shot out of him as well. So it might well happen. And if indeed it does happen, Dan, what might we see from these fighters?
You're exactly right, John. And I'm going to go back just a tiny bit further to that quick turnaround inside the Octagon we have to do on the side of the Thames when McGregor Nate Diaz was made. And if you remember in that breakdown as we were discussing, I said that the Diaz brothers don't have wrestling; they have pressure, which forces you to wrestle into their jiu-jitsu game. It's pretty much the same thing here with Poirier. Now I know Poirier can wrestle and he will wrestle if he needs to, but it's going to be far more reactive. Like I do feel if there is grappling in that one, it's going to be much more because Poirier's managed to turn the tide a little bit. You know, maybe third round, early fourth round, he's starting to pour pressure on, and now we're starting to see level changes from McGregor. Like, I think McGregor's grappling is going to have improved just purely because of the fact that he was preparing for Khabib, because he knows that everybody wants to ground him to avoid that left hand. So in the year that we've not seen McGregor and all the time before that, I would imagine that his grappling game has improved, several levels that we've just not even had the opportunity to see. I even go back to, the Holloway fight when he injured his knee down at 145. And his takedowns were beautiful. We got, 3-4 different takedowns in that fight. Lovely top control, really mean shoulder pressure as well. Like, he knows exactly what he's doing when it hits the ground. I just don't think it's his first option, and I don't think it's an option he chooses unless he doesn't feel like he has many others. So that's what I expect. I mean, I think, McGregor will level change if he's under pressure or if he's hurt. I mean, if that lead leg's taking a beating and he's starting to struggle, he might start to look to wrestle, and then that's when we see Dustin Poirier and the old submission skills that we've not seen too much anymore. You go back to his early featherweight days, and he was a Darce choke killer. The Jonathan Brookins one's the first one that jumps into my brain, because he's got Brookins backed up against the fence and he's pouring pressure on him, and Brookins level changes straight into a Darce. So I think that Darce choke from Poirier, or a few other submissions which I'm sure he feels like he's got in his back pocket, they might be very useful if McGregor starts to fatigue and decides to wrestle.
Cannot wait to see it, my friend. Listen, thank you very much for all of your thoughts and your analysis. That is us done for this Inside the Octagon, for this epic UFC 257. It is the return to Fight Island. It is a rematch. It is massive. We hope you enjoy the fights. Keep the conversation going using the hashtag Inside the Octagon. Tweet at UFC Europe, and we will see you next time.